Well, we've reached the end of our first lecture series, and I have to admit that when I'm lecturing, I kind of feel like this guy. He's holding up a sign that says advice 50 cents, good advice $2, and jokes for free. And I'm trying my best to give good advice, and I hope that you're finding a lot of what I have to say in that category. But if not, hey, hopefully at least you get some fun out of these lecture series. So what I think it's really valuable to do after we've gone through as much information as we've shared is to kind of circle back and understand what we've really learned from this process. So let's start off by saying that we've covered that marketing research is not inherently scientific and that in practice it can resemble pseudoscience. And in fact, if you take nothing else away from this class, I want you to remember this point. We are using the tools of the scientific method, and we should be approaching every research project with a certain amount of scientific rigor. The reason our work as marketing researchers, and qualitative researchers in particular, tends to be discounted by our colleagues in the sciences is because we often don't apply a scientific framework to what we do. It's just the way it is. We have an obligation to follow the scientific method and apply good research methods. And I encourage every one of you to cling to that ideal no matter what your bosses or clients demand of you in your careers. You will be better researchers for it. Secondly, qualitative research is not about just labeling data, but it describes the intent of a project. Open-ended responses in a quantitative survey should not be labeled as qualitative data any more than the use of scales in a qualitative study should be considered quantitative. Qualitative research is about understanding the perspectives and behaviors of individuals, deepening your understanding, and then constructing or refining your broader hypotheses or theory as a result. The third thing is that qual and quant come from different sources, different backgrounds, different ideas, but they go hand in hand. And I used different analogies. I talked about Batman and Superman. I talked about two twins that were long lost twins that were coming back together. I talked about two sides of the same coin. And all of these were used to describe that these two things belong together. And when these two forms of research are quite effective on their own, both have distinct weaknesses and blind spots that need to be accounted for. A good researcher uses both of these toolkits to provide a body of research, and it's always worth recommending to your end users that both styles be used, either simultaneously or one after another. So qual and quant go together. We've also learned that as marketing researchers, we have to be mindful of the distinction between theory and practice, and we have to be willing to rely on best practices as a means of ensuring we're practicing science and not pseudoscience. I referred you to several fields that you should study once you've graduated, like behavioral economics, UX testing, semiotics, and survey methodology. And I encourage you to keep abreast of the survey literature and be deliberate about validating your work whenever possible. So let's conclude this lecture series by discussing what we're going to accomplish over the next 6 weeks that follow. First of all, we're going to learn about 4 different styles of qualitative research. There is observational research, individual depth interviewing, also known as in-depth interviewing or IDIs, focus group research, and ethnographic research. And every week I'm going to take you in depth through each of these methods and explain how they work. We're then going to have a week that covers qualitative analysis and reporting, and then we're going to have a week that covers presentations and the future of qualitative research. And that's a lot of ground to cover in a short amount of time. Every week, you're also going to have a supplemental interview with real-life qualitative researcher and a series about the previous week's case study and assigned articles. As I mentioned at the beginning of the series, one of the things that I want you to take away from this class is an appreciation of what qualitative research can do. One of the things you're going to find in the real world is that there's a strong desire for quantitative data, but when you really need to understand something, there's no substitute for detailed qualitative perspectives. I once presented a study to a room full of people that had quantitative data from over 600 respondents, those data were very clear in articulating the preferences those participants had about some concepts for a new line of packaged food items. Even despite that clarity, and I mean, it was a good study, it was well designed, we still spent most of our presentation zeroing in on what 20 participants who'd been through a qualitative telephone interview with us had said, because that was where the real understanding of the data came from. And that was amazing to me, how much time we spent hearing what those 20 people had to say, even though we had 600 other people that had been through a survey. To me, watching a research audience get drawn into the excitement that qualitative research can provide is like watching people who have been seeing the world in black and white suddenly begin to experience an entire spectrum of colors that make the world more vivid, more wondrous, more thoughtful, and more exciting. And that is what I hope that this class will do for you.